that in none of the institutions I'm familiar with, including my own, we emphasize the fact of the triple bottom line, which is what is the impact on social and environmental aspects of the corporate results. So this is something which I hope that you would introduce as a discipline and as a way of thinking in your own professional life. The fourth point I like to make is all related, these are all interlinked, that the finance is not the driver of the business. It should not be in the driver's seat. It should be a tool for the execution of the strategy. If you are not in consonance and in alignment with the strategy which the company or the vision which the company is pursuing, then there is a disconnect between your profession, your usefulness as a CFO, and the objectives of the company. And this is a common recurrence in many companies where the CFOs think that they are the custodians of all what is going to affect the financial health of the company, and therefore they are not concerned about the investment which will produce results over time, whether it is investment in human resources, whether it is investment technology, which may be quite lumpy in the beginning, but this may have very positive beneficial effect in the competitive environment for the future. And this could be a source of competitive advantage for the companies. But I'm amazed at many CFOs who are trying to get rid of people and do not agree to invest in technology because they think that this is a cost, rather than they look in the cost-benefit calculus and try to figure out whether the cost-benefit ratio is going to be positive over time horizon with a discounted cash flow. And I think this is something which I would very much like to see. And as I had already commended the chartered accountancy, I find that the accountancy profession has this particular tendency and the narrow focus, which I believe should be removed from the mental and the intellectual thinking of the accountants and the auditors. And this to me is very, very critical for the future comparative advantage of those companies. The fifth point is that the world has seen so much greed, especially among the bankers who have now tarnished their image, because the bonuses they have earned has brought a bad name to the entire profession of the bankers all over the world. There is no distinction between good bankers and bad bankers today. We all pay lip service to corporate governance and ethical values, but it is not how much you have on the chart or in your annual report or in your speeches. It is how much you practice the corporate governance and ethical values in your day-to-day life. That really counts. You have to walk the talk. You just can't keep on having talked the talk. And this is where I personally think that the society in which we live is becoming very impatient with the lack of ethical values and inadequate corporate governance. And before the legislators and the public opinion does a great deal of harm to the finance and the banking profession, it is incumbent upon all of us involved in this profession to come up with our own ethical standards and the values, not only as a charter, but as a practicing tool. If you do not wake up to this call, then I'm afraid that, like the US Congress and the UK Parliament, who are, debating some very, very rigorous and tough measures against the financial institutions, this may spill over to countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. So before that happens, we should all ourselves try to make sure that this unintended consequence of the legislative excesses do not harm the profession, because the pendulum will swing to the other direction, and there may be a backlash which may not be very good even for the economy as a whole. We all pray that this does not happen, but that gives us an added responsibility that as professionals, as the CFOs, we should try to practice the ethical values. The stories which I have come across, even in the private sector, where private deals are being made in the procurements of goods and services, is really mind-boggling. And I thought that in the private sector, you have a lot of controls and checks and balances, but it seems that this is not happening. And a lot of media people approach me with these stories, and I cannot vouch for them, I cannot authenticate them, but I just want you to be aware that there is a lot which you do is not only known to you and the person with whom you have entered into that kind of deal, but it's public knowledge. The media has become extremely powerful in Pakistan. Therefore, you please do give credence to what the media is telling. They are now concentrating on the public office holders, but it is quite possible that they may direct their guns towards the private corporate businesses also. So I hope that the corporate governance and the ethical values do not remain a pious mantra, but all of you would practice that. You may earn a little bit more money in the process, but you are actually exposing yourself and the entire private sector to a great deal of damage. This country has gone through the nationalization in 1970s, whose pernicious effects are still being felt. I made a research that if we had continued the path which we were following in 1969, Pakistan today would have been a middle-income country. But there was a setback, and the setback was because of the greed and the perverse behavior of the private sector at that time, when we were all being told that 22 families were controlling the entire wealth of this country. So if there is opulence, people are driving, four-wheelers and Mercedes-Benz, while there is abject poverty where people cannot meet their both ends meet, that is going to be an explosion which this country cannot afford to meet anymore. So my request to all of you is that the private sector should come out as far as the ethics and corporate governance is concerned as a model for all other sectors, including the public sectors, to follow. Unless we do that,